Don't you think that I think Daniel has already said quite a lot. So should we start, going into a bit more detail and let's.
Up to you. Do you want to start that then? Because I've said a lot
Yeah, I
already.
think. Yeah. I mean, I think we should. You've already mentioned that this is an admission that we don't have, and you know what? Actually, Daniel is going to explicitly say that later on in his statement that we have empirical evidence is not there's no empirical evidence for God. He is going to mention that there is some analytical evidence that is presented by Muslims and other believers, but he says that we don't need that. uh, God is proven by our intuition. Majority of mankind throughout history, according to what he considers history, which by that would mean documented history. Humans have believed in God, and therefore this proves. I don't know. According to him, this proves that God exists. Um, Technically, I think if he was being honest, all he could have said, let's say, even if he was going down this particular route, would have been that, I mean, a more reasonable statement would have been that just like we use, we have a lot of beliefs based on solely on our intuition. Similarly, our belief in God is also justified solely based on our intuition. This should not conclude from this. We should not conclude that God truly exists. But what he might conclude from this is that his belief in God is justified, just like other beliefs that humans have through intuition are, let's say, considered justified.
I think this will lead into a series of serious problems basically, and I'll give one or two examples. I'll try to equate those. One is very basic, and then we encounter pretty often, and there you'll find there are junkies who deny that the Earth is round, right? So the flat Earth theory, right? That is still our intuition. I mean, if you think through it, our intuition says that Earth is flat, right? And that was the case for like millennia, probably before Copernicus and Kepler came into, or before that time. So if you were to believe that those kind of intuitions, you can see demonstrably that you have been proven wrong for your very basic core intuitions, right? So that is one example. Another example is the horizon, right? The horizon problem, right? You see that the uh, at the horizon, you see that the uh, Earth meets up with the sky, basically, right? But that's not a reality, basically. But if you want to go and make up that as a reality, again, it leads you into really absurd conclusions, pretty much. But those are in very basic intuitions, right? And unless until we came up with better theories, maybe empirical data and all those things, those intuitions will be demonstrably wrong, pretty much, right? So yeah, I mean, I don't think I have any more to say here.
Sorry, did you ask me to talk?
Yeah, shall we move forward? Khayalie, you have anything to add? Mahdin, you have anything more to add?
Is there a lot more to hear from Daniel's part, Kylie? I know you've seen a glimpse of it.
I mean, what I'd say is that, as I mentioned earlier, he's going to expand on this argument now. He wouldn't say too much about it, but he's going to make I think, one or two uh, further points which he might not have mentioned yet. But I don't think he's going. I'm not sure exactly how long this is going to go, but I think he has covered the primary argument, so we can
Can
actually
I
discuss it.
Can I add one more point? And that
Yeah,
is
yeah, sure,
to,
sure.
again, one more example, basically. He talked about, maybe he probably expands on these things that I'm objecting to, and he has already answered the moral intuition. And I think that kind of equivalence does not fit really with the God, basically, because you have, for the moral intuitions, you can demonstrably see what kind of effects it has, right? And then your moral intuitions have, you can say at least on a fundamental basis, that your moral intuitions are probably forced by other fundamental things like empathy, or maybe uh, compassion, and all those things, right? But that same thing cannot be done with something like a god, because they're into completely two different realms, pretty much, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
let me just say something about that very quickly. This leads Daniel. I don't know what his views are on other things, but this leads Daniel to many unwelcome conclusions for his own theistic framework, in the sense that if indeed moral intuitions are sufficient or without any evidence to corroborate them, right, and that doesn't require any further evidence or and so on, then the idea that atheists or secularists or materialists or naturalists cannot have an morality independent to God, or you need to substantiate a morality or make a moral case, or you need empirical evidence for evil or good or whatever the things that they kind of generally agree with, that goes all out of the window, because now you're saying, you're making an admission that you can actually have some beliefs that don't require independent corroboration. But if that's the case, then what is the need for challenging atheists on atheist morality and saying it's all relative and subjective? But it's not relative. It's it's a universal belief. These moral intuitions exist. They exist throughout society, and therefore they don't need any evidence. They don't need any. They have their own warrant, special warrant. You have a special license to believe. For example, maybe killing people is wrong. Raping people is wrong, and so on. And you don't need independent evidence for that. You don't need any further explanation. And you don't need divine command theory to seat it into the mind of God. So that one welcome conclusion. A second issue is that if you start saying stuff like that, then the idea of universality of these ethics and so on, or ethical feelings, you can't get Islam necessarily from it, right? You don't get Islamic intuitions, Islamic ethics or Islamic framework. So what happens there? Then there remains unaddressed problems there, where certain ethical mores that were the case all around the world. For example, for the longest time, it was unmitigated, unfettered, unregulated slavery. What is universal? What do we mean by universal? How many cultures is required? How long does it have to go for? How many geographical locations? At what point does it stop being universal? Yeah, then you have also a question of why should universality matter in the first place? Because when somebody says that this is universally the case amongst human beings, does he mean that this is embedded within the human condition and therefore innate and biological? Or does he just mean that it is universal? Well, right now things are universal, right? Or becoming more universalized, like many of the secular democratic principles, for example, equal rights are being universalized. Then what about that? At what point, and if that's the case, and this only happened in the last 100 years, then one has to ask, at what point of history do we say this is where it was universal and then it stopped being universal, or it started being artificial, right? Was it after the introduction of Islam? But that seems a bit arbitrary. There was an entire history before Islam, just like Haqiqatjou is arguing that there's probably an entire history before the last 100 years where secular democracy got universalized. And today secular democracy is universalized. So what's going on? So he has to articulate all of these issues as well. And there's problems of definition, problems of words, what they mean here. And then finally, there's lots of innate beliefs that we have that just don't correspond to the reality. If it's the case that if something is universal and innate, let's say we find out that it exists in all cultures throughout time and space historically, and it's biological, and children have it, young children can have these particular beliefs. Well, 150 cognitive biases are like, some of them are likely to be biological. They exist throughout culture and widespread throughout humanity. Let's say confirmation bias is arguably a biological proclivity, an issue with our brains. So we have certain cognitive illusions and distortions that affect our reasoning. Think about the gambler's fallacy. or we have problems with mathematical intuitions, right? We can't imagine vast amount. We can't imagine large numbers or large amount of time, for example. What's the difference between a billion and a million? We need proper illustration to demonstrate the size difference. A lot of people are not intuitively able to grasp it, and we make the mistake. So should all these cognitive biases now be accurate lenses to view the world? Is confirmation bias an accurate way of understanding the world? Why is it called a cognitive bias if it's no longer a bias? We should call it a cognitive truth, right? A properly basic belief. So he's creating all of these weird problems. And this is also criticisms against Alvin Plantinga as well, to some extent. They're creating all these weird problems that that should not really exist. I mean, think about this. Another one. A lot of people believe it's okay, and they thought it was universally okay to stare at women and publicly observe a woman in a leery way, in a creepy way. That's a very natural thing. It happens, and that would, according to Daniel Haqiqatjou's system and methodology, be a properly basic belief that doesn't require further justification. Any evidence showing that this actually leads to harm or as a problem or a social issue, well, ignore it. It's a properly basic belief. It's a truth, right? And if that's the case, then harassment against women or being leery looking at women should be completely natural and therefore justified. But instead, he's saying that you have to lower your gaze, right? But wait a minute, that's the natural belief is to look at women, right? Isn't it? I thought so, because that's what's been happening all throughout civilization and era. So all of these problems, I can go in, you can go down this rabbit hole and think of millions more. I'll stop there. But you can imagine these problems just create a can of worms.
Right, I agree. And yeah, I mean, one of the fundamental points that Mahdin, you touched, how far are you willing to go back to see if those moral intuitions have been there forever or for however long? And that's one of the reasons, because as you mentioned, there were women were being stared at, and that was considered not as a kind of a moral intuition, right? And then sacrifices and all those things were happening all across the tribes, pretty much, for whatever intuitions they had about it.
At what point of humanity? Because humanity's been here for 300,000, more than that, maybe. Yeah?
Right, exactly. And that's the point I'm saying, that the sacrifices were all across the cultures, pretty common to your firstborn child or whoever, right? So where do you exactly stop and say, oh, okay, these are not our moral intuitions anymore, and what we have taken from those, the God belief is the proper intuition to reach to a kind of a reality, basically, or to a belief at least.
Polytheism as well, and animism, thinking that objects, trees, sun are gods. That was very natural, and that,
exactly.
Where do we stop the buck? Where do we say after this point it's artificial and not natural? I don't know what he means. I basically don't know what he means. Well, yeah, carry on.
I think a very important point that you have just raised, and I'm just going to repeat it because it's very important. That what you mentioned about when Haqiqatjou presents this argument, he has to concede then that their question or their criticism on atheism about their source of morality, because the moment you are going to use your moral intuition as a basis and as something that is innate in us and not requiring us, and considering it something that doesn't require anything else for us to verify it, to evaluate it, or to confirm whether it is our moral intuitions are right or wrong, then there is then the question that theist often asks to atheist about where do you get from your morality from? The answer is simple: our intuitions. So this, you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? So you'll either have to go this route or that route. So choose one. You can't do both. And this is often what theists actually do when it comes to morality. This might be a bit off topic, but this circular reasoning is often employed by theists because they want to prove God through morality and morality through God. So, they can't play this game, this double-sided game. That you have to stick to one side, choose one side, either base morality in God or base God on morality. So, although we could criticize that as well, but at least being consistent, you should, in order to be consistent, choose one side. So, yeah, I mean, this is one of the very key points that you just mentioned. Other things that you just talked about, are moral intuitions. I mean, again, you're right. So, for example, throughout history, slave people considered slavery was fine. It was not considered something wrong. So, their moral intuition was, so, I mean,
Just
people
emphasize,
who
just
were,
emphasize. What I mean
yeah,
is not Islamic slavery. I mean unregulated,
uh,
unfettered, total,
exactly,
where you can actually complete chattel slavery, like the transatlantic and Atlantic. Can't even talk anymore. There's this complete slavery in the form of you can own, kill, maim, torture, barbarically
Trade,
mutilate. Yeah,
buy
trade.
and sell, and all
Yeah.
those things.
Now,
Yes.
we actually may say that Islamic slavery was a little bit better than that, but that was not the norm. The Islamic slavery, they kind of proudly declare that to some extent. Islam came in reform,
yes,
and so that's not the norm.
that needs to be emphasized.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
what we
I mean,
talking?
yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, please go ahead, Madhu. Please complete.
No, yeah, I've said it. I think everybody gets the point of
Yeah,
what I'm trying to say. It's a historical aberration. Islamic slavery. I mean, there are similarities. There are similar empires which came very very close to the Islamic Empire. Similar proponents of secular democratic even not
right.
democratic but secular proponents historically as well, like Seneca, who asked for the abolition of slavery. I think even some Chinese philosophers, and there were empires I think at certain periods of time in the Chinese history that actually did abolish or significantly limit slavery. Although I'll need to get a reference for that if anybody wants to ask. But
Yeah,
well,
but
it
it
was
wasn't the norm.
yeah, it wasn't the norm exactly. But then that would be the norm, and then why are we following Islamic slavery? So he's got a bit more work. Maybe he's going to say something like he could make the argument that, but then when you have an intuitive belief or a moral prevalent universal moral belief, when we have that goes against God's belief will override. So he has to make it more sophisticated to make the methodology work. You see, he'll say something like, yes, on its own, universal intuitions are good grounds for justified belief, unless there's some sort of countervailing reason. And the countervailing reason in this instance is that the Islamic God is the reason. But he needs to make more work. He has to explain how that works, right? How
Right.
does that work? Why should one intuition, for example, override the other intuition? One. The second reason is why should we even intuit ourselves to the Islamic God over all other gods, right? So he's not made that part of the case yet.
Right.
And yes, yes. Yes, Philo.
Just one objection I wanted to make here, how how Daniel might respond to this, and he'd say a practice or a tradition doesn't become an intuition. Pretty much in this case, he might be saying, okay, slavery was a tradition, but was not an intuition here, right?
Okay.
But then he has to demonstrate that all those things that he's talking about, the God belief, they haven't become a kind of intuition through tradition, right? I mean, that then
Right,
again
Philo.
he's begging the question pretty much over there.
And we know that
Right. That's a
everything
good
that
point. Yes.
everything that you said we kind of know as well. That that's why Hamza Zorses and all these folks try to make the case for God is a intuitive or instinctive innate belief or something like that. They try to demonstrate it using to some extent evolutionary psychology, developmental psychology, and so on, to demonstrate that this is a natural, innate, inborn belief that children are hardwired to adopt, develop, and produce, basically. And they cite certain studies. If you heard of the notorious name here. So I think Philo, you might be able to remember it when he had these engagements with Essence of Thought in 2015. I don't know if you know, and he cited some academic called Olivera Petrovich, I think, and Justin Barrett. And Essence of Thought pretty much to him in back and forth YouTube videos showing that in fact he's misquoting, misunderstanding the literature, and in fact there is no journal or a series of articles substantiating the idea that God believed, that we are born with a belief, innate belief in God. There is no such evidence, and in fact there was another atheistic philosopher who did a literature review or compiled a literature review called with the name I forget his name. I think his name is John Shook, right? On this, and he demonstrated there is no, it's not biologically hardwired in us from the moment we're born, or even early age when you learn to talk at age 2 or 3. Believe in God. There's plenty of obviously tribes that don't believe in God, who are geographically isolated and beyond Western socialization practices, and they don't have, first of all, they don't form a belief in a God. 2, they don't form a belief in any specific God. And 3. There's no evidence that that specific God is like a monotheistic Islamic God, right? So you can't derive any of those things, and obviously there's no sense of belief in the Quran or the Hadiths or the Prophet Muhammad. Yeah. So what is it then? Haqiqatjou has to then demonstrate that these books are also from God. He has to make the case for Islam. Unless he's going to say that all of that is universal, that you're just born believing in Muhammad. Well, no, that's not true. He needs some psychological evidence to demonstrate that. To this date, there hasn't been any psychological evidence. But even if he does, here's the problem. Some of the first things that I said, even if he shows that it's natural, there's plenty of natural beliefs that are wrong. Right? Confirmation bias, 150 cognitive biases, causal agency detection or hyperactive causal agency detection biases that we have in our brains, where if we hear a sound or look into the sky, we are more likely to see faces or people, or we anthropomorphize nature. A lot of people might know here, when you're lying down in bed when you're a kid and you're looking at the ceiling, you might see people in your roof, or you might see people in a painting that are just not there, or in clouds. That's how astrology formed, right? You look in the cloud and you kind of impose a little animation on the cloud, and you see a picture that's not really there. Pareidolia, that's called.
It's pareidolia. That's what I wanted to add. You just
And hyperactive agency detection is actually known amongst to be a cognitive bias. It's not. We don't. A lot of theists have quoted this, misused this, I should say, to think that, look, we have a natural belief to believe in agents, minds in places, and anthropomorphize things, and therefore God. But it's not that. It's not an innate belief in God. Rather, it's an innate belief to think that there's a person around the corner, right? So if you're walking down the road and you hear a rustle, you hear a hiss, you're more likely to think that there's a creature, there's a thing there, right? We do that, and there's a reason for that. And evolution psychologists say that this increased our prospects to survive, because it's better to have a false belief. But we're more risk prone here to believe that there's people there, irrespective of it being false, because it's better to think that it's false, better to believe in something like that, even if it's false, so that we instinctually run away from predators, right? So even though, we have a higher tendency to attribute things to, or guess or predict that there's a person around the corner through fear, so that we run away, because that increases our survival prospects. So even though we are epistemologically, in terms of truth, we're wrong, even 7 out of 10 times, it's better that you are wrong. It's better that you're wrong and run away and survive. Better that you're, sorry, I should say, it's better that you're wrong most of the time, than you be wrong most of the time. But that few times where you might have been right, you may have been right, but because you didn't have the agency bias, there was a predator, and the predator comes and kills you. So it's better to have some false beliefs than true beliefs.
That was true in the past, for sure. Mahdin.
And that is a vestige of our evolutionary history.
Right, and so we have surpassed that kind of we still have those intuitions about things, right? You hear some really loud bang, and you just all of a sudden you are attentive, even though that sound
Yeah,
is not going to harm you in any ways, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's kind of an example of the same thing that you're talking
yeah. And
about.
it's
But
and
one thing, sorry,
yeah,
Mahdin.
go on.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, no, no. You finish. You were talking. You finish.
Right. One thing I wanted to go back and just give examples of this one very good point that you made. Those very many tribes that don't have a God belief, and there are quite a few tribes in Amazon. There is one tribe that I'm aware of that is in India. It's a part of India, by the way, and it's in a island called Andaman Nicobar Island. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. So there is this tribe in Andaman Nicobar, and they are pretty much, they haven't been touched by the outside civilization. And why that those studies are flawed in my eyes, basically because majority of the parts of the world have been touched by either Christian culture or Muslim culture or some form of paganistic culture, and
Yeah,
only those tribes that have remained secluded within themselves have been able to have this no god belief kind of a thing, basically. And
yeah,
so when you're talking about those intuitions, basic intuitions, that those are the prime examples that kind of a thinking is flawed, pretty much, basically,
yeah.
because these tribes have been secluded forever, pretty much, in a sense.
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. There are problems with the empirical literature demonstrating that they have not been, some of them have not been visited by missionaries or whatever. But on many of them, we can probabilistically say it's unlikely that they were. And indeed, in these places, there isn't a God belief. If there's an
Yeah,
inclination or inklings towards some sort of superstition or supernatural, it's not really a God belief. And Daniel has to demonstrate God, because the debate topic is about God and a monotheistic God. So a polytheistic God is not enough. A finite God is not enough. Supernatural beliefs are not enough. So if they have some superstitions, it's not necessarily a monotheistic one. He has to demonstrate that indeed. Otherwise, if the evidence show that they don't have beliefs in monotheistic deities, then Daniel ultimately and maybe only something that is superstitious. Maybe they form superstitious cults, but not a belief in a monotheism. Then Daniel still has to then demonstrate through evidence the reason why we should believe in monotheism, because his own case falls apart because he can't support the idea that this is natural. And like you said, because of most society, most areas of the world have been within the reach and domination of some form of religion that contains a central deity or something, it's very hard to separate that from the descended populations today. And therefore, of course, how do we distinguish it from it being a reflexive, innate tendency versus something that's been externally socialized within us? And some of the evidence, like that Hamza Zorsis cites, like Justin Barre's study, which is a single set of studies about children who he argues in the paper. Barrett argues is a demonstration that people have an easier time in believing in God and other natural beliefs that he terms natural. For example, children find it much easier to understand and believe and hold the concept of dualism, which is that the mind and the brain, the mind and the body are two distinct substances. And it's far easier for them to believe in that than to believe in the idea that there's only one substance, like physicalism. And similarly, children find it much easier to believe in a deity, etc. The problem, and so on. So the study didn't show that there's an innate belief that's affixed to the brain, like almost like a biochemical component of the brain that's there, like our regions that smells, the regions that are designed by evolution for sensing smells and tastes and so on, that there's this region of the brain that somehow senses God. It's nothing like that. What he's saying in the paper is that children have an easier time, right, to understand a dualism or a God belief. Well, of course, I mean, I'm sure children will have an easier time to understand a very commonsensical understanding of time versus the theory of relativity and so on. People and children are going to have a probably easier time to understand that the Earth is flat than to explain to them that the Earth is actually spinning very fast, right? Yeah, and it's actually spherical. So these things are obviously easier for our child's mind to understand because it's a child's mind, and there might be reasons for that. And furthermore, Barrett's study doesn't actually show it doesn't demonstrate the social, it doesn't control for, I should say. Science has to control for things. It doesn't control for the variable of indoctrination and socialization versus natural impulses and so on. We have because these are children at the age of 3 who probably, and most of these parents probably talked about God and creation and so on. And there's no way to separate this from the children's socialization. How do we know that this wasn't, influenced by the parents, persuaded by the parents, through influences and so on, to hold on to these particular beliefs? Of course, you might have an easier time in holding on to a belief that your mum and dad told you over and over again since you were young. And then when you're introduced to counteracting beliefs that go against that, you're going to have a harder time to accept it. So again, it's entangled with all these social pressures as well. And Justin Barrett's study doesn't do any job of separating that, which a good scientific study should be doing, and he doesn't do that. So Barrett's study is just one study. Vast majority of studies, sometimes go the other way. Then there's many studies showing that children don't do that. Children do not hold a belief in God, or and so on. And some children can actually distinguish between fiction and reality more easily, more readily, especially when they've not been indoctrinated into a religion. But when they have been indoctrinated into a particular religion, they find it difficult to distinguish between fact and fiction. So again, that's a study supporting the idea that social influence, religious upbringing, and teaching has an effect of how you look at the world. And Barrett's study might be contaminated with that as well.
All right, Mahdin. I think you said everything that probably should have been said about this. You rightly said that the Barrett study was flawed. So many problems. I think probably we might keep going on. Maybe what ages were the children taken to be as trial subjects, basically, right?
I think toddlers. Yeah. Sorry. Are you asking me, or are you just saying something?
No, I'm asking you. What were the ages of those toddlers?
I can't be exact. Yeah, they were old enough to be conscious agents capable of learning things. Old enough.
One of the problems that's over there is like, how do you even communicate with kids who are like really young? How do they communicate their beliefs, pretty much, right? So either you go really early, or you risk that that they being indoctrinated within the families themselves that they have been born into, right? Because they're going to see the world around themselves, their parents, and they're going to get influenced by it, maybe consciously, maybe subconsciously, right? And so those are the problems right there. And this data is coming from probably self-report. I'm not quite sure if it was a controlled trial. I mean, it's very hard to do a controlled trial of something like this, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to keep the kids at home, right? The kids are at home, and you're doing a trial from the reports by parents rather than just trying to get the data directly from. So I think it's a very, very flawed. I mean, from the outset,
I can't recall if it was. I can't recall if it was from parents per se. It might be by studying the children, but it doesn't control for the upbringing versus whether it's natural. It didn't enact any methodology to distinguish between whether it's innate versus it is upbringing.
But I mean, even considering that they went over there but you still have that environment in the house, right? Whatever that environment is, right? It's the societies. You see that environment.
Right? They basically pluck from society and put in a classroom. Maybe,
if you really want to do that, perfect kind of a test or trial, then you have to cut them out of that normal society. They won't be able to mingle with other kids, and then those kind, which is going to be almost impossible to do, pretty much, right?
Yeah. Well, ideally speaking, you need twin studies. So a twin is born to one family, a twin is born to another family. That controls for the genetic component, and they're raised in different environments. So one twin is in a religious family, and one twin is in a religious society, and one twin is in an irreligious family and an irreligious society. And then you can see like what sort of inclinations they have. And if one twin, for example, has an easier time to accept certain things versus the other, then you might say that, look, the child's mind is more capable of resisting certain beliefs that they find awkward. Like if you try to teach them about a monistic theory of mind, a physical mind, then they don't find that intuitively appealing. They intuitively reject it. And then you can say that this is most likely not influenced by religion, most likely not biological. The environment, most likely, I misspoke. Most likely not environmental, because the environment is controlled for. This is a child in an irreligious society. Yet he or she has an affinity towards holding certain beliefs. Like they're more likely to accept beliefs when you explain it to them through a religious lens. Like, the soul was put into the body. The body is made out of a soul. Sorry, your self is made out of a soul, and the rest of your body is a physical body, and they're more likely to find that appealing, versus a monistic theory where the soul, there is no soul. It's just one. The consciousness is physical, and if you show that, then you can demonstrate, show that it's easier. But then Barrett called that natural. He said that since they're more susceptible to accepting one, therefore it's natural. And in some sense, I can understand. He doesn't mean natural here to be that it's just known without any learning. He meant it's more easier to understand. That's what he means by natural. It's a very subtle use of the word natural. He means that we have a tendency towards going in that direction. In some sense, that does make sense to call it natural, I would admit. And if that's the case, that would show that it is natural. But then it won't tell you anything about its truthfulness, because that would be the naturalistic fallacy, right? It's natural, therefore it's right. It's natural, therefore it's true. It's not. That's the naturalistic fallacy. And there's plenty of things, like I said, that are completely natural. Many cognitive biases are natural, right? And beyond a cognitive bias, the illusion of the fact that the Earth is flat is very natural. If you teach a child, and not just the illusion of the Earth, time, the fact that time is not absolute, and time might be subjective. And relativity shows that time is very weird. It's a weird concept. Should we just get rid of physics now because the child's mind can't understand it naturally? Is this what it's come to in order to believe in God? Is this what Daniel Haqiqatjou's repercussions of his belief?
I think we took a Mickey out of him, basically.
This is the repercussions of his belief. Einstein is wrong, everybody. You can't believe it. Yeah. What the heck? It's natural. Time is natural. Why didn't anybody say this to Einstein when he came out with his theories? Look, dude, have a haircut. And understand.
Our intuitions are going against you premature.
Yeah, and understand that time is absolute. Newtonian time makes a lot more sense. Newtonian time is the truth, because it's innate. Children believe in it. Yeah. Yeah. Before the 20th century or whatever it was, everybody believed in it. So we should get rid of Einstein. This is Haqiqatjou's belief. So this is how I can go on about this for days. It's embarrassing, But anyway, yeah.
I think Daniel has, I don't know. Hold on. There is a message. Let me highlight the message. Khayalie, between, if you want to say something, I'll just.
Whilst you do that, let me just respond to a private message of mine. I'll be back in about 1 minute. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think Mahdin has said, I've covered so much. We don't even need to add that much. And maybe I'll just add this. What I'll add to this is, even from his own, from the perspective of Islam, the religion, it is often, even if it is mentioned in the Quran that there are people who, when they're presented with Islam, they say that, why should we believe in this religion? Were our forefathers wrong? Why shouldn't we believe them? So, isn't it a similar point that Daniel Haqiqatjou is making? Islam or Quran is actually criticizing people believing in the religion of their forefathers just because of the fact that it innately, it seems aligned to them, because of the fact that they live in that culture or that those beliefs have been adopted through their forefathers. I can hear an echo.
No, I
So what I was saying is that this even goes against his own religion and his own book, that such standard or default beliefs based on what someone's forefathers believed, what a majority people believed, that thinking according to your own religion is wrong. In fact, this has been mentioned so many times in the Quran that majority do not believe. Now, the point is this: if we are considering innate human behavior and innate human intuitions as something true, then people not believing prophets and their messages, which according to Quran is the case, that majority do not believe. This is not been mentioned once or twice in the Quran. This has been mentioned so many times. If that is the case, then that should be true, because humans innately do not tend to believe in prophets. Does that make the case of the religion, um, through the entire system of prophets, does it make it false according to Daniel Haqiqatjou's methodology? Apparently so.
exactly. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, he needs to. There's a lot more work that has to be done here, and in the sense that he needs to show whether certain things are natural and how do you go about figuring out it's natural and what's the evidence, and it's not just a hallmark of the workings of the human mind based on the current knowledge and understandings of the time. For example, for 10 centuries, human beings believed in plenty of crazy, weird things, like, for example, epilepsy was caused by spirits, or possession, it was some sort of possession. Ghosts had possessed the unfortunate victim of what is now known to be an epileptic seizure, and that was just a result of ignorance or lack of knowledge of the time. All of this, then, we should rewrite entire human knowledge. Schizophrenia, epilepsy, these are medical terminologies that are just bankrupt right now, because we should get rid of it, because Haqiqatjou has shown that as long as something is known universally and intuitively for a long period of time, arbitrarily dictated by him as to where the period of the time starts and how many cultures need to believe it, and without any particular evidence to demonstrate, to figure out what is natural or not, he just says it, then everything else that deviates away from that is to be discarded as superfluous inventions that deviate away from our natural nature. So the psychology community is completely wrong about schizophrenia. They're completely wrong about medical community is completely wrong about epilepsy. It's the Stone Age dwellers and so on who believe, they are right. That they're going to be all right. And back in the day, well, I don't know how, during hunter-gatherer times, they used to drill holes in the heads of people in order to take out spirits. That was prevalent for that time. How does he know that this is not just a problem of knowledge and understanding over time, during a period of time, and information loss, which with greater information we've acquired and a better understanding? And I'm sure he accepts that for many things. So how does he show that that's not the case for God? If that a case for he's right to say that civilizations historically believed in God. How does he distinguish that from a genuine natural belief versus just the inner workings of the human mind of the time, because we were in intellectual poverty of the time, and he's not. I don't know how he's going to show that.
all right, Mahdin, I'm going to read the message from Cosmic. I think I don't know what happened to Cosmic. He said he's going to join, and then I don't know if he's coming to join. I'm going to hopefully join the stream. I have watched half of this debate already, so hopefully we'll have something reasonable to contribute. Just waiting to download and install iOS 17, then going to jump in. And after that, his message was the belief in the earth being flat is also super intuitive and was widely held in the past. The idea that it's spherical really messes up with your intuitions. All
So
right.
let me just quickly say something about all the other stuff that Haqiqatjou said, since we're kind of beating a dead horse or donkey at this moment. he said, just like all these other things, like logic, the laws of logic, just like moral intuitions and so on. If that was just like what else? What else did he say? Did he say the existence of other minds? Here's the thing: it is the same criticism I made.
Mathematics and all those things, right? Yeah.
There you go. So this is the same criticism that I made against Alvin Pradinga about these things. Those things can indeed be justified to some extent, right? So there are different theories, different ideas that are posited to explain those things. For example, logic might be reducible. So these are I don't hold any of these particular positions, but I'm just going to outline some positions. That this is not an exhaustive list. Some philosophers, for example, say logic is reducible to natural phenomena. That logic is merely descriptive. Now, we describe it as logic in syllogistic form through our language means, but logic is just recognizing a feature of reality. And then once you recognize that feature of reality, we then formulate a set of rules. What we have noticed is that if an apple is falling from the tree, then it can't be simultaneously true that apple is not falling from the tree. Yeah? If a human has 4 limbs or appendages, then it can't be simultaneously true that a human has 3 appendages, right? That's just a recognition of the natural world. The natural world just operates in this manner, and therefore logic can be reduced to descriptions of the natural world. So when we come up with things like the law of logic, that's our human invention, right? But when we say, it can't be the case that A is true and A is not true at the same time, that's just a formulaic way of saying a banana. It can't be true that a banana exists and a banana cannot exist at the same time, right? That's because, and why is that? Did we just make this up, or did we just intuitively realize this? We just went into a cupboard and closed our eyes and realized, wait a minute, we are just describing the world. We learned this how? Through evidence. The evidence, the reality of the world, the reality of the cosmos substantiates this. That's not the same as God, right? So logic has some evidence, which is that it's just a description of the world, but God doesn't have the same parallel. So we can distinguish logic from God on that basis. Some other theories of logic would say, like Hilary Putnam, who is a philosopher of science, that every single scientific theory presupposes the usage of logic, and our best scientific theories work as a result of that. We can make the argument that none of our scientific theories presupposes the use of God. God is not unnecessary. But logic is necessary for these scientific theories to work. Without logic, the scientific theory falls apart. Without God, on the other hand, the scientific theory doesn't fall apart. And therefore, logic has a basis in that. And other stuff might be, logic is through analytical thinking. Now, unless we think empirical thinking is the only way to learn about the world, analytical thinking, which is like 1 + 1 = 2, and I'll talk about mathematics in a minute. And you can't have a married bachelor. These are the realizations we make through tautologies. You can't have a married bachelor is another way of saying you can't be married and unmarried at the same time. But how do we know that? It's through understanding the terms. The answer is in the definition. You can't have a married bachelor. The answer is in the definition. And through definition alone, we can come to these truths. You can't have a square and a triangle. That's because the definition of a square is such that it excludes that of a triangle. Definition of a triangle is such that it excludes that of a square. And we just learn this through our concepts. We don't need to go and examine the natural world. Well, the first point I made that you actually do learn these things from the natural world. And this is what a philosopher called Quine, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, Quine made on a paper called The 2 Dogmas of Empiricism. And he showed analytical thinking and synthetic thinking is a false distinction made by the logical positivists in the 20th century. And in fact, we should collapse off that distinction away. And I am moved by that position, by the way. I do think that is a sound position. But if you're going to have this idea of analytical thinking versus synthetic thinking,
sorry to interrupt, just to add a simple example. So what you just said. So for example, if we say that something exists, something cannot exist and not exist at the same time, you could arrive at this simply because of definition, right? Because you'd say that something exists means that it does not exist. So that is by definition it's true that it
Yeah.
exists, and therefore, by definition, it cannot not exist, because that is the definition that we have, actually. That is how we are defining it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true by definition. That's what analytical thinking usually would do, you know? So analytical thoughts don't really require you to. So a non-analytical thought will be like Khayalie is X amount of years old, right? You can't get that from understanding what Khayalie is or who Khayalie is. That's an independent fact that you need to go and find out through the world. On the other hand,
Mhm.
um, like I said, square triangle is close to an analytical fact. But then you have Quine trying to who makes the argument that in fact the distinction isn't as sound as you think. And anybody who's interested, Quine's paper, two dogmas of empiricism, it's the logical positivists who made that. I think it started with Kant, Immanuel Kant, with the logical positivists like A.J. Ayer, Bertrand Russell, who I think was a positivist of some kind, and post-positivists as well. They maintain the distinction between analytical truths, true by definition, those are tautologies, but they don't actually explain the world. They don't necessarily explain what is true about the world. So the fact that squares can't be triangles doesn't tell you what's in the world. It just tells you that a square can't be a triangle. But in order to know about the world, you need synthetic truths, which is when science comes in, which is observations come in, right? So the fact that a bachelor can't be married, because by definition, doesn't mean that the world contains any bachelors. In order to find out whether the world contains any bachelors, you have to go out there with a microscope, telescope, any scientific means, or just your observation with your eyes and detect, look, here's a person, he's a bachelor. Oh, bachelors exist. But you can't find that out by definition alone, right? Unless it's very, very complicated of a definition. But usually you can't find that out through a definition. Whereas you can find out through a definition that a bachelor is somebody who has to be unmarried, you know? And that's what the distinction that the logical positivists made, and this was kind of blown apart. I would imagine a lot of people would say some philosophers still hold on to the distinction. It's kind of even 50% of. I think last time the Phil's paper survey did a examination of philosophers' views, a good deal of philosophers did believe in analytical synthetic distinction, but there's a good majority also, a good minority maybe didn't. Maybe that's changed now. That's the last time I saw it was maybe like 5 years ago. But whatever the case, the analytical synthetic distinction, analytical thinking can, in itself, can substantiate the use of logic because it's true by definition. And if it's true by definition, then it has one. For example, the laws of contradiction. It cannot be the case that the law of contradiction is false because it presupposes the use of the law of contradiction. Right? For it to be false, you have to think there is a false, and there's something to the meaning of falsity and truthfulness. The law of contradiction therefore presupposes the law of contradiction, and therefore, in this sort of intellectual thought experiment, you can come to the realization that this can't be false, and therefore, through analysis, analytical thinking is true by definition, or it's a necessary truth. Yeah, just like you can't have a married bachelor is a necessary truth. You can't have a square triangle, a necessary truth. So a necessary truth here is you can't have the laws of contradiction. The law of non-contradiction is a necessary truth, and if it's a necessary truth, then it doesn't need any further justification. It's necessary. Then there's a difference between that and Haqiqatjou's version of God, because Haqiqatjou is saying it's intuition. No, Haqiqatjou, you need to show that it's a necessary truth, just the way I showed logic is a necessary truth. And guess who does the necessary truth stuff? People like Muhammad Hijab with the contingency argument. Again, that means you need to make arguments. People like enthusiasts of the ontological argument, who try to make the argument that God is necessary or something, the perfect existence or whatever you want to call it, and other arguments. But you need an argument, you need evidence, you need reasoning. That which means if Haqiqatjou is forced to engage in reasoning, he has to give up this argument of his where you don't need to engage in reasoning.
All right, Mahdin, I think you have said it all. Maybe we should turn off the video now. Right. Shall we go further ahead? I don't think Khayalie might be able to tell if there's any more material that we can pick on.
So where
I
are
think
we right
Mahdin,
now? In what's the timestamp? Let me see.
1548 is the timestamp right now.
So, I mean, I would say that we have covered so much ground, right? Just from the from what Daniel had already said. I think there might be few sub points that he might make that we might have missed. But I think we have covered the gist, in quite comprehensively. I don't think we need to even go further. Let's not, make this stream too long. We have covered so much ground, and we should let the audience digest what we've already provided them, right? So let's not make this for more difficult for them. I think we have covered. We have Mahdin has t- presented so many rebuttals to this single argument that I don't think there's any need to further go, even to go into it further. So let's just end it, I would say.
Right. Martin, what do you say? Shall
Yeah, yeah,
we post the link and have callers in if they want to talk,
yeah,
or shall
yeah,
we just
yeah.
close it?
Post the link for callers. We'll just talk for 10 minutes or something, and see if
Oh,
anybody wants to talk about it.
all
Yeah.
right. So the
Cosmic
link is
Inquiry wants
link
to
is
come on.
public. Sorry,
Yeah.
Martin. Go ahead, please.
If Cosmic Inquirer wants to come on, then we can.
Yeah, Cosmic said he's coming, but then he just disappeared. I don't know what happened. He was downloading iOS 17. He said maybe he has gone to Apple America to download it. Sorry, Cosmic. A joke at your expense. But no, you're welcome. Come on in and join. I don't know what happened. You just disappeared. Or anybody else who wants to join, come on in, talk to us, and who wants to see this debate or wants to, just talk about the if they've already seen it and want to ask any question, please do join. And if you have any other question, maybe you can also join. Not a problem. So yeah, I think this seems like this debate was a disaster for Haqiqatjou. At least so far, it seems to me. I don't know what happened. I mean, ahead, right? Maybe there were exchanges that demonstrated that he was able to bolster his argument, but so far it doesn't seem so.
Yeah.
I think there could have been better rebuttals from Matt Dillahunty's side, and particularly I haven't listened to the third part of the debate, but the second part of the debate, once again, Daniel made a very weak set of arguments to prove that Islam is the most compelling religion as compared to other religions. So he gave a few very weak set of criteria to judge this, level of uh, compelling evidence. So I think, I mean, I wouldn't say that Matt Dillahunty dealt with those very well. Um, I'd say that there was some, uh, you know, it wasn't that interesting from what he said. Honestly, I
So
might be wrong, but at least that is what I understood.
let me understand this correctly. So first part is just trying to prove the God's existence. Second part is where he proves
Yes,
that Islam is the correct religion, right?
Islam
And
is
Islam.
no. Let's be very specific, and
Mhm.
that is what Matt Dillahunty actually points out that the second part of the debate has a very ridiculous uh,
What is
topic.
the part two? What's the
The
part two?
part two is Islam more compelling than other religions? And he
Oh,
says that
okay, okay.
this is a very ridiculous topic,
Title,
because
yeah,
it
title
doesn't
wording.
matter whether it's compelling or not. What matters is it true or not?
Is it true or
And
not?
it
Right, right.
shouldn't be in comparison to other religions. It should be true on its own. So so Matt Dillahunty has a very he doesn't like that topic, and he takes a very different approach to dealing with it. And he has the first statement about it, so it's not like he's going to rebut. He rebut Daniel's statement in his statement. He just makes a very, I mean, if you're watching this debate, you could just listen to Daniel Haqiqatjou's arguments, and I think that would be enough for you. You don't need to listen to Matt Dillahunty's side, because I don't know, maybe he didn't. At least I felt that he didn't add
Mm.
anything interesting to the debate.
I think
Right.
yeah. I think this is like a very kind of difficult. It's so bad that it's. I think people might think this is not much of an argument, and they may not
You're right. You're
tumble
right.
upon it. I
I
think that's why
that is
I'm.
what actually happened. I
Yeah.
think that's what actually happened. The argument was so bad, and actually, if we go on further into Daniel's statement, what his approach is, his approach actually, it's not just that he's presenting an argument from intuition. His approach is that we shouldn't accept the atheistic requirement of evidence, because why should we, right? Why should we accept their criteria or their standard of evidence?
Mm.
So since they cannot, we shouldn't accept theirs. Intuition is enough. I mean, we don't need to question this. That is his entire argument. And Matt's entire point is, well, you are going to provide evidence for God, and in your statement you have agreed that no, you cannot provide evidence for God. um, you are just basing it on intuition. In fact,
Mm.
that wasn't even how Haqiqatjou presented it. So you know there was an hour's discussion about this.
Looks really bad on Haqiqatjou. I mean, this is just saying
Yeah,
that my intuition's argument or my intuitions as an evidence is stronger than your, evidence is. There is a feedback, Mahdin, from your side.
All right. Is it gone?
No, I think whenever we talk over each other, probably then I hear that feedback. But yeah, I mean, what I was saying here is that somehow that comparison, that my intuitions have as much weightage as your empirical evidence, or whatever Matt Dillahunty's as an evidence, which I'm assuming is
So,
going to be at least weightier than just saying my intuitions are correct, pretty
yeah,
much.
just to let you know, Cosmic Inquirer is on now.
Cosmic,
Hey guys,
welcome. How are you, mate?
uh, I'm good. I hope all of you guys
I
are
thought
doing
I
well.
thought you got a flight to what, Silicon Valley.
I think there's too many people downloading it right now, so it's kind of slow, to be honest.
Oh,
But
okay. Oh,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, and their softwares are probably like one gig or 2 gigs or something like that. Probably it just arrived
three
in the market.
gigabytes in this case. Uh,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Okay.
and too many people, I think, flooding the servers requesting to download.
Okay.
Regardless,
It just
I heard most of what